Hello there, I'm Simon Rafe and welcome to Brown Bag Bible Study, the Bible study you can do in your lunch break. Now this is an introduction to Scripture, which will give you some information that you might not have known and encourage you to read the Bible. But most importantly, it's presented in little bite-sized pieces which are perfect to fit in with our busy lifestyles. Every week I'll be concentrating on a small part of Scripture, either one of the 73 books of the Bible or a group of related books, and I'll be bringing you interesting facts and information to help you understand it. I'll also be including links to further reading, articles, books and so forth, which will help you learn to love sacred Scripture even more. This week's St. Paul's longest letter, his letter to the church at Rome. Now, it was most likely written while Paul was in Corinth and for a number of different reasons. Firstly, Paul sought to introduce himself to the church at Rome, whom he had never visited, and secondly, to encourage their financial support for a planned evangelistic mission to Spain. Now, at this point in Paul's ministry, he had journeyed around the Eastern Mediterranean and established many churches, and he desired to go even further. He hoped that the church in Rome, en route to Spain, would be able to provide him with the resources to take the gospel further. But in addition to these practical matters, Paul also outlines the gospel very clearly, with a definite emphasis on the relationship of the law to the saving power of the cross. In this respect, this letter is very similar to Galatians, although it is milder in tone and much less angry. Like Galatians, however, Romans emphasizes the power of faith to save and shows that adherence to the Jewish law cannot save. Romans occupies a point of great importance in the theology of certain Protestant sects, and the Catholic apologist must be ready to defend it. Martin Luther felt this letter was of great importance, with some of his words appearing to place it above the Gospels in certain ways. He interpreted the letter as teaching salvation through faith alone, and not works, rather than simply saying works of the Mosaic law do not save. So certain was he of this view that he actually added the word alone to the text. In chapter 3, verse 28, so it read, "Man is justified by faith alone, apart from works of the law." Of course, this word was not in the original Greek text, and Luther admitted as such, claiming that he willed it to be there and that his will was reason enough. He then went on to say that if any papist were to complain, then papists and asses were one and the same thing. Now, most scholars view this as a poor reason to add words to Scripture. As mentioned when we talked about Galatians, the letter of St. James contains clear teaching concerning salvation by faith alone. In fact, the only time the phrase faith alone appears in the Bible is the letter of St. James, saying that man is saved by works and not by faith alone. It is for this reason Luther hated the Epistle of James and wanted to cut it out of the Bible. But we get ahead of ourselves. Now, the church at Rome was a mixed group of Jewish and Gentile Christians, and the teaching contained in this letter is clearly directed to such a group, focusing as it does on the correct position of the Jewish law in salvation. It does not upbraid the Romans for adherence to the Jewish law in the same way as Galatians does, although it makes the theological point of the new covenant fulfilling the old more clearly and explicitly. A Catholic apologist wishing to explain the relationship of the two covenants should be well versed in the text of Romans. Perhaps one of the most beautiful and heartfelt portions of the Epistle to the Romans is chapters 9 to 11, where Paul expresses great sadness that his people, the Jews, have rejected Christ and do not accept him as Messiah. He even says that he would be cut off from Jesus himself if his people would just accept Christ, a truly noble gesture, even if futile. Throughout these chapters, Paul explains the fulfillment of the Old Covenant in the New and concludes by advising Gentile Christians not to lord it over Jewish Christians through the metaphor of the olive tree. All of these are important points as Catholics possessed of the fullness of truth, and we would do well to remember and meditate on them. So, read the letter to the church at Rome and most definitely look at the additional materials so you can understand the theology presented there and defend against Protestant misinterpretations. And that's all for this time. But next time we'll be taking a look at St. Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus. Until then, I'm Simon Rafe, and God bless. To learn more about the place of Scripture in the lives of Catholic Christians, I urge you to read Pope Benedict's apostolic exhortation Verbum Domini. The Pope encourages all Catholics to read, learn and love Scripture and to understand its relation to the Church. A link to this exhortation is included in the reading materials for every episode of Brown Bag Bible Study. Just click the link over there.